About 20 years ago, I was introduced to a training method called clusters by Coach Poliquin. I was at a seminar he was giving in Montreal. I was an Olympic weightlifter at the time. And obviously, I wanted to get stronger, especially considering that my lifting technique was, to put it mildly, extraordinarily bad. So I was power cleaning and I was cleaning and snatching pretty much like a football player. But because I was strong, I was still putting up decent numbers. So for that reason, I wanted strength to be even higher because I knew that I would never be a great technician. The only way for me to become a competitive lifter is to be stronger than everybody else. So I walked up to Charles during the lunch break. First lesson, I learned, you never go ask a question to Coach Poliquin during a lunch break. But when I told him I was a competitive weightlifter, like he changed his demeanor because he really respected and loved strength. And I asked him, Charles, what is the best method to get stronger? And he said, well, it's cluster training. Oh, cluster training, that sounds super awesome. I mean, clusters, right? That must be effective. So, well, what are clusters, Charles? Well, you do one rep, yeah. You rack the weight, you rest a bit, you lift the weight again, okay. You rack the weight, you take a 15-second rest, yeah. You lift the. Charles, are you telling me that the best training for strength is something I've been doing all along? Because as a weightlifter, that's how you train. You snatch, you drop the weight, you reset, you snatch, you drop the weight, basically clusters. I was like, dude, I was looking for the best strength training method to like put my training to the next level, and it turns out it's something I'm already doing. Talk about disappointment. But that is a question. You do that not just on your snatch and clean and jerk. You do that on your squats. You do that on your deadlift, on your presses. Oh, okay. So basically, I was introduced to cluster, which is doing micro sets of 1 repetitions with a short rest period. So for the typical Poliquin cluster, was 5 reps with your 3 RM. So let's say 90%, 91%. And with a 15 to 25 seconds rest period. Now, that's not the only type of cluster that exists. And depending on what you're trying to accomplish, depending on what type of athlete or individual you are, some clusters might be better than the other. But they all work pretty much the same way. They work by allowing you to do either more work with a certain weight, so for example, doing 5 reps with your 3 RM, or do a higher quality of work, so being able to accelerate more, for example, on each rep, because you have some rest in your set, okay? So the first cluster that I learned about was the Poliquin cluster I just mentioned. So that's 5 reps with your 3 RM, with around 20 seconds of rest between sets. I learned really quickly that this method didn't work well with either strong individuals or people from a strength and power sport background, like sprinters, like football players, or people with very high ratio of fast twitch fibers. The reason is that the 20-25 seconds rest period between reps is not long enough for them to recover. Because don't forget that if I'm doing clusters on squat or bench press, I have to rack and unrack the weight, which takes some energy. So right from the start, if I lose some energy racking, unracking the bar, the rest period must give me more recovery than the additional racking, unracking takes away. That's why a lot of strong individuals, when they did the traditional Poliquin clusters, they actually used less weight for 5 cluster reps than 5 regular reps because they just lost too much energy racking, unracking the bar, right? So but with hockey players, that work really well because they recover really, really fast, and they normally don't have the same high ratio of fast twitch fibers or high explosiveness as purely explosive or power lifters or Olympic weightlifters or sprinters, for example, okay? Now, for stronger athletes or more explosive athletes, I prefer the Miller clusters. Named after Carl Miller, who actually invented the clusters. He was a strength coach for the US weightlifting team. Miller clusters, you have the extensive, you have the intensive. The extensive is the foundation of the Poliquin clusters. It's very similar. You do 4 to 6 reps with a weight you could do 3 reps with. But you take as long as 45 seconds between reps. Okay? That will give you the additional recovery that will allow the strong athlete or the one with high ratio of fast-twitch fibers to get those extra reps. Now you also have the Miller intensive clusters, which would use a load around 95-97% of your 1RM, and you do 2 or 3 reps with 60 seconds between reps. That is a purely strength or peaking method. Okay? So these would be your broad clusters if you want to gain strength, for example. Now you can also use clusters to gain power. What you would do is you would add rest inside a set to allow you to do each rep with more speed than you would if you did all the reps in one set. For example, if I'm doing 6 reps on squats with 80%, chances are that the last 3 reps will be slow. The rate of force development is slower, okay? And because strength gains are velocity specific, by doing those slower reps, you don't gain as much power. Now, if you're taking 45 seconds rest after every 2 reps, do 2 reps, 45 seconds, 2 reps, 45 seconds, 2 reps. Now, each rep will be a lot faster. You will have no decrease in the speed or rate of force development during the set. So for an athlete, that will be very beneficial by training the rate of force development, which would be in the later phases of training. So clusters, again, I won't show you the demonstration because it's pretty straightforward. You do 1 rep, boom, then you would rest. Depending on the cluster you're doing, could be between 15 to 60 seconds. 15 to 25 for the Poliquin clusters, 30 to 45 for the Miller extensive clusters, 45 to 60 for the Miller intensive clusters, and the rate of force development clusters. So pretty straightforward, one of my favorite training methods. I don't think there is a better method to gain strength than the Miller extensive clusters because it will build muscle tissue while training the nervous system. That's the main benefit of both the Poliquin and Miller clusters. Remember, hypertrophy depends on the number of effective reps in a set. If I'm doing a regular set to failure, I'm going to get 5 effective reps, okay? Now, if I'm lifting a weight that's 90% or 91%, 92% of my max, I can get 3 reps, which is not optimal for strength. But if my cluster allows me to get 5, I get the same growth stimulation as any hypertrophy method, but I also get the full neurological development of lifting heavy weights. That's why it's so powerful as a training method. You get the same amount of hypertrophy and muscle growth as bodybuilding method, and the same neurological development as any strength method.